Well, maybe I won't start the timer. Else isn't working. Great. Always happy when there's all kinds of problems today. All right. Timer's working. All right, so today being the weekend just prior to Pesach, Passover, for those of you who don't know what that word means, we're going to go through the rules for Pesach according to the Bible, not according to the sages, not according to people who did not speak Hebrew, had never stepped foot in the land of Israel, didn't know anything about Judaism and based Judaism on what they learned from the Catholic churches of the time, though they weren't called churches back then. Those are the guys that are called sages. Those are the guys that everybody puts their whole heart and soul into, and boy, don't you say anything bad about their sages. But really, you got these guys that are not from the land, they're not from the place, they don't know the customs, the culture, the history, or even the language. They go and take a Aramaic version, because that was the language that they spoke, and they using Hellenistic thought and watching with so in the time of the sages, the elect used and wandered completely off the path. Okay, we're never going to have one now. Jesus. Just had to get up.
Well, after you threw it down, they said that's better.
We weren't making any noise. How can that be better? Are you seeing anything? Okay. The first step in preparation for Pesach should be to celebrate the new year. The verse prior to the Bible talking about celebration of Pesach talks about the the new year, the Bible new year. It has nothing to do with the Jews have two New Years. It's dumb, and it's anti-God. It's anti-Bible. So we've just celebrated the new year. What was that, last week? That was because it was the first of the month. Let's see, did I put this down? Yeah, so it's Exodus 12:2, because all of the law literally starts at Exodus 12:2. The says, "This new moon shall be to you the beginning of new moons. It shall be the first new moon of the year to you." So this is New Year's according to the Bible. Anyone that teaches you about any other new year is teaching you false Bible. Okay, the first day of the month of Aviv, that is the name that the Bible gave it. So let's call it what the Bible calls it, is the actual biblical New Year. This is the month that the children of Israel were led out of Mitzrayim, which I'm using for Egypt, if you recall. Aviv comes from the root av, which means father. More specifically, in Hebrew, the father of something is its origin. Thus, Aviv is the father or origin of our year. Aviv marks the beginning of our journey to freedom, to Torah observance, and to forgiveness. We could and probably should have a New Year's party on the first night of this month, which we did this year. However, this is not a biblically mandated celebration, and no day of rest is mandated. So if the party runs long, you have to get up and go to work the next morning, unless, of course, you've taken that day off in advance. Having this celebration would no doubt put everyone in the mood and mindset necessary to begin the actual preparations for the feast. All right, now when we get to verse 3, so that's verse 2, talking about the new year. It's not mandated. You don't have to do this, but I think it's a good way to get the whole thing started, to kick it into gear, get everybody thinking about it, get everybody, thinking about their preparations and stuff. Not so that they can do things ahead of time. Let's not do that. God gave very specific dates for very specific things to take place. So let's not do things before their time. Let's keep that in mind. Verse 3 says, "You shall," no, it doesn't. It says, "You speak to all the Adat," which is the Hebrew word for congregations, "of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this new moon, they shall take to them every man from the flocks." And then there's a Hebrew idiom, but it means enough from the flocks for a house. Because what it says is according to the house of their fathers. And if you don't realize that's a Hebrew idiom, you'll never know that it's just saying you take whatever you need. So you don't go out and slaughter 10 sheep when there's only 10 people attending, right? Because there's going to be an enormous amount of leftover if you do that. And that's God's totally against that. He's saying, no, you get whatever you need for your Passover. So if there's two people, and of course in the Bible, if you had to, well, it'll come up. I'm not going to jump ahead. On the 10th day of Aviv, you should procure a lamb or lambs, small or large enough to feed your family and all who intend to eat the Pesach meal. It is very important that we know exactly how many people will be attending our feast so that we will make the right purchase. So let your rabbi know if you are attending the service well in advance, right? You may want to remind him if he is forgetful as you get closer to the celebration. If the members of an observant household are too few to eat an entire lamb, they shall share one, cost included, with their nearest neighbor. How do I know? Because Exodus chapter 12, verse 4 says so. So we have to know that. That's what I started to say a while ago, but I wanted to wait until I looked at what I said about it. You understand that at this time, they did not have a place they could go and just buy two uh, lamb chops for husband and wife celebrating alone. They didn't have anything like that. If you went out to slaughter a lamb, you had to buy the whole thing, because once they slaughtered it, the whole thing was dead and the whole thing had to be consumed. So things were a little bit different back then. Now, if you want to get real technical about things, well, then you'd say, okay, well, I have to buy a whole lamb, and then I have to find enough people to split it all up. And you got to know that an idiomatic language doesn't work that way. We buy now, because of the way things work, we can buy what we need. We don't have to buy the whole lamb, though I think it's fine. I think that buying a whole lamb and making this sacrifice and cooking it in the ground like they do in Israel, and like some people do here in the States as well. As long as you have enough people to eat that, it's not a whole bunch of. There's always going to be leftover. There's always going to be some waste. Of course, we'll learn what we're supposed to do with that pretty quick, but you're just supposed to get enough. That's the main thing. And you got to procure it on the 10th, which means if you're going to celebrate with us, your financial part of the meal needs to be here on the 10th day, by the 10th day. At the very least, you need to tell us, well, I put it in the mail, because maybe we won't get it on the 10th day, but if you had to put it in the mail or something like that, you have to at least let us know on the 10th, right? It's by the 10th that we need to know, are you going to be here? That's all I'm saying. And if you're not going to be here on the 10th, not the 9th, not the 11th, it's easier to go on Saturday, or go on Monday or what. No, the 10th. That's when you're supposed to buy your lamb. So if you're doing this at home, get your lamb on the 10th. Then I don't know what kind of challenge that's going to cause this year because of all of the things that are going on with the lack of this and the lack of that. But you might want to start early. Okay. Now, verse 4 shows us that God does not want us to be wasteful. We should not purchase 10 lambs. I've already said all that. This is not a command for God's children to live next to each other or next to other observant Jews, because that came about, of course, from the sages. Oh, see, they all have to live together in one community, because how can you share if they're way off there? Well, that might have had some validity if you think about it, way back in the day when there were no refrigerators and there were no sorry to say there were no butchers, but there's always been butchers, if you will. They started off as priests, and then eventually non-priests became butchers as well. And by the Dark Ages, that should have been a thing where you could have gone and bought the amount of lamb that would have satisfied your family without having to purchase the whole thing. And that would have been acceptable, but the sages didn't understand that because they were not trained properly. So it would have been okay back then for them to do the same thing, is all I'm saying. But it's not a command that you have to live next door to other Jews. That's never been a command. It's not legitimate. The easiest way to comply with the law is to celebrate Pesach with your synagogue. It's truly the easiest way to do it. The law is to procure a lamb. We do not have to make the purchase personally if our synagogue is picking it up. We can pay our part of the cost for the meal on or well, I don't think you should do it before, but on the 10th of Aviv, maybe you should, if you've got that worksheet, maybe you should mark out the before. I don't think the only reason why I said before is because if you want it there on the 10th and you know it's going to take 10 days for it to get through the mail or 3 days or whatever, that needs to go before if you're concerned about it getting there on the 10th. But as I said a while ago, I think that it's okay if you put it in the mail a couple days before the 10th and you let us know on the 10th just in case it didn't come in. I think that's just as acceptable. All right. So the requirements for the lamb, it has to be a male, and that's what they mean when you go and you ask if the lamb is kosher. That means it's going to be a male lamb. When they're talking about kosher for Pesach, that's what you're purchasing is a male. It doesn't mean much more beyond that, other than it does talk about how it was fed and cared for and slaughtered and stuff like that. That's all they mean by it. It technically isn't actually kosher, but but it is the right kind of lamb. So you'll know that just by it being kosher. And also that it's a lamb of 1 year. They don't cut up 10-year-old lambs and tell you that they're kosher. That doesn't happen. Well, it shouldn't happen. It was not sick. It did not have sores. It did not have injuries. And of course, all of that's based on chapter 12, verse 5. That's how, but all I'm saying is when you go to your grocery store or you go to your butcher and they tell you that it's kosher, this is supposed to be what they mean by that. Okay, the sheep and goats were kept together. It must be taken from the herd. Gesenius says it means female, but the Hebrew text ends in a yod and a mem sophit, which is a masculine plural ending. So Gesenius and Bible Works were wrong. I point that out because I get that question a lot. All right, now we're told that we must care for that lamb. In verse 6, every observant family who procured the lamb was responsible for the care of that lamb until the 14th day, because you procure it on the 10th, and then you have to care for it until the 14th, because it will not be slaughtered until the 14th. Well, you see where that can be an issue. If you're buying 2 lamb chops because it's just you and your wife, or 2 lamb steaks or whatever, um, how do you take care of it? Well, you keep it in the freezer, I guess. I don't know. I don't cook, so I don't know that. But the cooks in our group will know how you take care of that piece of meat you bought in the store. In the olden days, when they procured a lamb, they were actually getting a live lamb. And yeah, there became a time when they kept those sheep in their homes, but it was originally because if the sheep stayed outside, the sheep was going to freeze to death, and then there goes your investment, there goes your Pesach meal, the whole thing. So they began to bring them in, inside because of bad weather, and then that after the Dark Ages became you have to groom it, you have to get the kids to fall in love with it, then you got to murderize it right in front of them. That's a horrible thing to do. Let's not go there. And let's not call Aviv Nissan. Can we stop that? I'm talking to the crowd here. Leave me alone. It is acceptable for someone from the synagogue to take care of the lamb on our behalf. So let's say we had 40 people coming. We might actually be better off buying actual sheep and doing the slaughter and all that cooking on the spot, which is very common in Israel. In various parts of America, there are people who do that. I mean, I know a guy that does that he's big on slaughtering pigs and cooking them in the ground, exact same way you do a lamb. And we almost talked him into coming out and doing a lamb for us like that once, but he didn't come through, because I think everybody ought to experience the real thing at least once in their life. It's a very moving process, very emotional time for us all. Anyway, and the reason why I bring that up is because if you sent money to your synagogue to pay your part of the lamb, somebody from the synagogue is going to take care of that, right? So when we go out and we make the purchase for everybody, well, I don't have any idea. Donna's either going to put it in the freezer or the ice box or something, but she'll be taking care of your lamb. That's all I'm saying. Since Pesach often happens, I've already said that. Now I want to make some acknowledgments here. I didn't know what else to call this. The feast belongs to God, to Yahweh God, no other God, no false God, no fake God, no idol, no God in somebody's mind. Because God himself, Yahweh God, said in Exodus chapter 12, verse 14, and in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 4, he, the creator of all, said that this belonged to him, not to the Jews, like the New Testament says. Was the New Testament wrong? No, not really. The reason why they said that was because since the Jews were the people of God and were the ones that did what God told them to do, they would call it the Jewish feast. But that didn't take away from the fact that that feast belonged to God. Just something people said. All right. The feast is eternal. You shall observe the feast of Pesach / Matzot forever, it says in Exodus 12:14, Exodus 12:17, Exodus 12:24, Exodus 12:25, Exodus 13:10, Deuteronomy 16:3. Yeah, God says it several times, right? Kind of trying to drive something home. There will never be a time when Pesach is not part of this religion. And how would you reconcile the fact that we haven't gotten to it yet, but how would you reconcile the fact that the Bible says that, now it says that it's God's feast, it says it's eternal, which means we have to celebrate it every single year, no matter what happened, every year for all eternity, Pesach will be celebrated, right? And it also will eventually, before we're done, tell us that you cannot celebrate Pesach if you are not circumcised. Well, Jesus made it all go away. Sorry. It's not eternal if Jesus made it all go away. Anyway, let's just stew on that for a little bit. I'll talk about it, I think, if I remember. Why do we celebrate this day? We shall always celebrate the Pesach on this particular day because it is the anniversary of the day that God led the children of Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, more specifically as it says in the text, but I'm saying Mitzrayim for Egypt so that it'll be less confusing. The place of the sacrifice. The lamb must be sacrificed at the place where God's authority dwells. And it does say Shem. Now, that gets translated as name, and that's nonsensical. That is not what this word meant back in the day. That's what it means now, but that's not what it meant in the Bible. Well, it kind of did a little bit, but generally, if they use Shem, it meant authority. Well, what is God's authority? It's His Torah, right? So the temple or the synagogue, that's where God's name dwells. And we know this, of course, because of Deuteronomy 16:2, Deuteronomy 16:6, and Deuteronomy 16:7. Seems like God was trying to make it clear. We are not allowed to sacrifice the Pesach lamb in our homes or any property we own inside our gates. That's in Deuteronomy 16:5. Well, it's a good thing you're buying it at the grocery store, right? Okay, of the firstborn males. All firstborn males, human and animal, are to be sanctified on the first day of Pesach. That's according to Exodus 13:2 and Exodus 13:12. So it's in there twice. This is also a command for every firstborn to make an appearance before his synagogue until the temple is in place if he lives in Israel. Right. If you're from America, even if they built the temple, you would still have to go to your synagogue unless you get on an airplane and go to Israel. That'd be the only way that you could do that. And that would not be a law. You do not by law have to get up in an airplane and go to Israel to present yourself at a temple, even if it was there. Although I don't know why you wouldn't, other than financial. I don't know any reason why you wouldn't want to do that. That would really be awesome. Anyway, you got to go to that place where God dwells. So in your case, as we've talked before, in order for you to present yourself, if you're not going to be here physically, and biblically speaking, you have to have a really good reason for not being here physically. One, you live thousands of miles away. Pretty good reason. Two, you got an ankle bracelet on. You can't go more than a mile away from your house. I don't know. There's going to be good reasons why you can't show up. You got to make sure it's a good reason. If it's just you being lazy and you not feeling up to it, you not wanting to do it, well, you're going to have to explain that to God. You don't have to explain it to me. But if you're not going to show up, what we need is to see you. We need to see you on that night, on Pesach night. You have to present yourself. So I think that the right way to do it is for us to see you on video. But if that, for whatever reason, can't work, because say you can't get the video to work or whatever on your computer, get a picture on there of yourself, a recent one. Don't be showing us a picture, your high school graduation picture from 1967. Okay, let's not do that. Anyway, every firstborn donkey will be redeemed with a lamb. That's the rule in this, and which means that a donation of a spotless 1-year-old lamb or the equivalent of the price must be offered to the synagogue. Why did I connect that to? Well, that's a funny way to say that. I'm going to have to change the way I said that because that doesn't make any sense. I'm sure it was all in the same verse, the donkey and the lamb and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, to redeem a donkey or to redeem a lamb, just think of it this way. If you're redeeming a donkey, you either have to give a donkey or you have to give the price of a donkey. So if a donkey costs $100, then your donation is $100. If a sheep costs $50, your donation is $50. It's the donation is for the whole thing, though. It's not for that, I paid $20 for the lamb chops. No, you have to give whatever the whole thing would cost. That's the redemption of the firstborn. Now, once it's done, you do that once. You don't do that every year. So if a person does not want to redeem a donkey, he must make the donkey a pet. That's what it meant by break its neck. You don't actually break the neck. Because if you're just going to kill it, why wouldn't you just give it to him, right? That's dumb. This is idiomatic. It just means that you can't get any labor out of this animal. It literally has to become a pet. But the firstborn male of humans must be redeemed. That's, of course, we're still in 13. We're on verse 3. Again, this means that a donation of a spotless 1-year-old lamb or the equivalent of the price must be offered to the synagogue or temple if it is standing and you live in Israel. That's the only way that temple's going to be where you do this, is if they're standing and you live there. Otherwise, it goes to your synagogue. Okay. Let's talk about some rules here. The Pesach meal cannot be moved. The Pesach meal must be eaten in one place. It cannot be taken from one place to another. That's 12:46. We've jumped back to 12. Do not break the bones. We cannot break the bones of the lamb. That's verse 46. No congregation is exempt. Every synagogue, every home synagogue, whatever, if you're Jewish, you are not in any way, shape, or form exempt from this. I say here that in Israel must celebrate the Pesach according to 1247. Oh, wow. I didn't know how off this stuff was. You remember me talking about the date here, that it was with Israel? Every synagogue that is in Israel does not mean that you're actually there on the premise. It means that you're with Israel, that you're a part of Israel. So even if you don't consider yourself Jewish, but you're living according to God's law, if you're going to keep your covenant and continue to live according to God's law, you're still going to have to do this as if you were in Israel, because it's supposed to be a place in your heart now. Those who cannot eat the Pesach, let's talk about that. No one who is uncircumcised and non-observant, a foreigner is what you call that. None of them may eat the Pesach. That's chapter 12, verse 43. If you are not circumcised, you cannot eat that meal. Does it mean you can't celebrate with your family? You probably would not be allowed into the synagogue if that's your issue. You probably shouldn't be allowed into the synagogue. But if you're doing this at home, your parents could make you chicken, I suppose, because you're not allowed to eat the lamb. That's the main thing. You're not allowed to do it. All right. No uncircumcised male shall eat the Pesach, again in verse 48. So we're in 44, 45, and 48. They all reiterate how important it is for us to know that if you're not circumcised, you cannot eat the meal. That doesn't mean you can't eat the unleavened bread throughout matzah. It doesn't mean that, like I said, you can't have chicken when everybody else is having the lamb. You are simply not allowed to do it. And that did not change because Jesus died on a cross. How do I know? Because God said it repeatedly. This is God's feast, and it is eternal. So nothing's going to change something that's eternal. Outsiders, some, can't actually eat the Passover. If an uncircumcised and non-Torah observant male, who's called a foreigner in the English Bible, lives among the Jews and wants to eat the Pesach, he, his sons, and his servants of his household must all be circumcised. Chapter 12, verse 48. Again, why it's so important to understand this distinction. This is an idiomatic way of saying if a person wants to convert to Judaism, he must be circumcised. If he wants to eat the Pesach meal, you can't do it any other way. Jews and converts must celebrate Pesach the same way. Yeah. So if you guys are following this path and you've not gone through the formal process of real conversion to Judaism, but you're following this path, that makes you a convert, right? It makes you a follower. They used to call them the follower at the gate and stuff like that. They've had names for this throughout history. But we know this because Numbers chapter 9:14 says exactly this. So there's not, let's think about that. If they have to, you can celebrate it the same way and still eat chicken. I think there can be a pretty good argument made for that. But in the end, if the synagogue says that that's not okay, that if they're not eating the Pesach, they can't celebrate the Pesach, well, then you have to give them their due, because that's one of those binding in heaven and earth things right there. I think it's fine if they're going to do that. If not, they can still eat the matzah, because matzah is a separate celebration altogether, and those rules are not about matzot. So I'm just saying, you may have to miss the Pesach meal, but you could go ahead and do the unleavened. You're actually, if you're following this path, you're supposed to do the unleavened thing. You're just not allowed to eat the meat. So again, some synagogues are going to say no, no way, no how. But most of them, I think, will be okay with if this guy wants to eat, because most of them eat chicken. They have the shank bone and all that kind of stuff, and don't even eat lamb. So I don't think most of them, to tell you the truth, I don't think most of them would actually have a problem with it. But some of them will. And if they have a problem with that, and you're part of that, you do it their way. If, on the other hand, you're following after us, well, you're obligated to do it my way. And my way is very helpful, I guess. If you want to eat the Passover, but you're not circumcised, you just eat chicken. All right. There's a first and a second Passover. Most of us know this. In the 14th day of Aviv is the Pesach. It's Leviticus 23:5, Leviticus 23:6. And on that day, on the 14th day, we call a holy assembly. Yeah, so we will be starting at 7 p.m. because no, that's not right. We really need to start after we eat. I've always had trouble with this one because we always start at 7 p.m. when we do our feast, and this is the one we probably shouldn't. This is the one that we probably need to, because if we're going to have the Pesach meal, the Holy Assembly should be the Pesach meal. That's when the trumpets should be blown and all that kind of stuff. So you just kind of need to hang out and make yourself available if you're being a part of this, so that you can eat your meal with us and have that. You need to be a part of the assembly. I just can't tell you what time it will be because I'm not sure how long it's going to take to cook the meal. So we'll start up the little interweb thing and try to, update you on how fast or slow it's going. Right? I mean, just kind of keep your eye on your computer. So we're going to call the Holy Assembly. There is no occupational work that can be done during the holy assemblies beyond that which is necessary for preparing food to eat. We know that because Exodus 16 and Leviticus 23:7 both, Exodus 12:16 and Leviticus 23:7 both tell us. Now, here's an interesting one that you rarely ever hear a Jew talk about. You have to stay out of your house all night long. Because it says you will stay out of your home all night and return in the morning. Deuteronomy 16:7. This doesn't mean that you have to stay awake all night. This doesn't mean that you have to sleep in a tent. Yes, you can rent a motel. Yes, you can rent an Airbnb. I think that's what those are. And yes, you can sleep in a tent. You can sleep in your car. You can sleep out under the stars, on a blanket. Who cares? The idea here, because this is idiomatic, the idea is that this celebration was supposed to last until the sun came up, because it starts very late and it's supposed to push in to the morning. Well, we've tried that, and none of us old people can stay up that long. Before you know it, somebody's snoring. Doesn't even mean you can't go to sleep. It just means you can't go back in your house. That's all the rule is. You do have to bring an offering, because the Bible in Deuteronomy 16:16 says, you will not come to Pesach without an offering. Deuteronomy 16:16. And we're supposed to have a barbecue each night of this celebration. So this is going, Pesach is night 1, then Matzot, you got 7 more nights of that. There's 8 altogether. That's according to Leviticus 23:8. And then we have to remove all of the leaven. And this is one of the things that you can get a little sketchy here. Supposed to take all the leaven from our houses on the 14th day at evening, as the sun's going down, until the 21st day of that evening. All of that leaven is supposed to be out of our house. Exodus 12:15, Exodus 12:19, Exodus 13:7. Do not eat anything leavened during the Pesach and Matzot feasts. Exodus 12:20, Deuteronomy 16:3. You are not to be seen with leavened bread. Exodus 13:7. No leaven will be found in any of the places you dwell, and that is under your authority. And so, and this has been an issue for Jews for years. What if you own an apartment complex? It's under your authority. So you better be careful who you rent to. I'm just saying. If you have a company, you can't, and it's open part of that time. Some people shut down for the whole week. But most people only shut down for the 2 Sabbaths, and open up in between. Well, you can't be having bagels at your office because it's under your authority. Now, if you go to your office where you work and it's somebody else's business and you're just the employee, they can have bagels. You cannot, according to this rule. No leaven will be found. Okay, so I just did that one. Oh, no. This is kind of saying the same thing. No leaven will be found in any of the places you dwell, or that is under your authority. Oh, no, it's just the rest of it, for the whole 7 days. Unleavened bread is called the bread of affliction, because it is the bread that reminds us of the affliction of Egypt. Deuteronomy 16:3. Now, what happens if somebody messes up? Everyone who eats leaven during the feast, whether born in Israel or not, is to be cut off from Israel until the feast is over. Exodus 12:15, Exodus 12:19. This is not a forever thing. So if you mess up the first night, you're not allowed to have conversation with anybody in your congregation until this feast is over. It can be pretty rough, right? But that's the sum total of the punishment for that sin. And it is a sin because we're commanded not to eat leaven. So when we eat leaven, we commit a sin. What's committing a sin? It's becoming unclean. That makes us unclean. And so you're not allowed to be a part of the group because of that. But once the celebration is over, well, then your punishment is over. So, um, what I wouldn't do is get 2 or 3 days from the end of this thing and say, you know what, I can go 2 or 3 days without talking to my congregation friends. I'm just going to go out and get a pizza. See, that's how you tempt God. That's what the Bible talks about. Don't tempt God. That's what you would be doing because you're trying to manipulate. You're saying, well, it's okay to be sinful for the last 3 days of this or whatever. No, that's bad territory. If it's an accident, it's an accident. If it's on purpose, that's way more than just being unclean. All right. Everyone who eats leaven during the feast, whether born in Israel or cut off from Israel, that's Exodus 12:15, 12:19. They cannot attend the closing celebration. If you mess it up, you can't come to the closing. They cannot attend the Shabbat services that happen in between. They cannot communicate with those who are faithful at all. Also, if a man is clean during the first Pesach and does not celebrate it, he is cut off from Israel. Numbers chapter 9, verse 13. This is kind of what I was talking about. If you can celebrate it, you have to celebrate it. What would cause you not to be able to celebrate it? Well, I have a choice. My brother died last night, and I can go to his funeral and rush back here, but what happens? I'm unclean because I've been around a dead body. Can't lead you guys in any of this and all that, so what happens? I can't go to my brother's funeral. And that's sad and heartbreaking and all that stuff, and my family's going to be angry with me for years over this, but I can't do it because I'm going to be here to celebrate the Pesach. I'm commanded to do so. I want to do so. So that's what we're going to do. And then there's the commandment to eat matzah. You have to eat matzah each night from the 14th until the 21st day of Aviv as a reminder that God brought us out of Egypt quickly. That's found in Exodus 12:15, 12:18, 12:20, 13:6, Leviticus 23:6, Deuteronomy 16:3, Deuteronomy 16:8. Does that tell you how important this is that we eat unleavened bread? Do you have to eat a whole loaf every day? No. Just eat a little bit if that's all you want. Don't worry about it. You just have to make sure you eat it. All right, what about the sacrifice here? The lamb of each observant family will be killed as the sun is going down on the 14th day of Aviv, which is the anniversary of the night that God brought the children of Israel out of Mitzrayim or Egypt. It's Deuteronomy 16:6, and there's some confusion by the sages because the Hebrew text says Ba'arev Kavo Hashemesh, in the evening as the sun goes down, the second new moon. It was something I was thinking I should say about this. Let's see, the Lamb of Egypt. Okay, so now we're back to, well, what are we going to do? We have to buy a live lamb, and he has to be slaughtered and all that. And I think if we have the right conditions, we should do that, but we don't. Dawn and I cannot go buy a lamb and slaughter it and feed 6 people. That's going to leave half of the lamb or more wasted. And we've already been told we can't do that. We can't buy more than what's needed. We simply do not have enough people coming to this place for us to purchase a lamb and do this. So this is one of those things that you can't observe one law without breaking the other. And sometimes it's that way, and God knew that. But I think that it's a good lesson for us that when we do, or if we ever do get to the point where there's enough people for that sort of thing, we better go buy an actual lamb. Good thing, I guess we better get a fence around this yard one of these days. Okay, let's talk about the blood on the doorpost. In Exodus 12:7, it told them to place the blood on the doorpost and the lintel. In 22 of 12, it said place the blood of the lamb in a basin. And then it said dip a basting brush in the blood in the basin and paint the blood on the lintel of both doorposts. Sorry, lintel and both doorposts. Once the blood was applied, the doorposts and lintel, no one was allowed to leave their home until after the sun came up the next morning. And all of that came from Exodus 12:22. Sorry. The blood was placed on the door only on the night of the first Pesach to physically keep the destroyer from killing the firstborn. It was a one-time thing. However, we can place a red cloth over our door and over our posts. We have a red silky thing that we put over our door. Just an homage to it, if you will. But it was a one-time thing. As you know, God said in that night you had to stay in your house to stay safe. And on this night, because God has redeemed his children, we stay out of our house. All right, talking about the meal. It says that we have to roast the lamb in fire. Exodus 12:9, Deuteronomy 16:7. And 9 also says you can't eat it raw. And 9 also says you can't boil it in water. And then 9 also says cook the head, legs, and body together. That is idiomatic. You're not supposed to cook the head. You're not supposed to cook. It just means that everything that you've slaughtered, that you've cut up from this lamb that is edible, all of that is to be cooked together. It does not mean that you literally have to cook the head of that lamb. Oh, that's really sent some people down a weird road with that. It's kind of like you've seen that thing with the pig with the apple in his mouth. Going to serve a sheep that way? Ugh. Okay, in verse 8 of that same chapter 12, it says that you eat the lamb at night. So the sun has to, and of course, you can't cook it until the sun goes down, the first sunset. So it'll be during the second sunset at night when you'll be eating the lamb. You have to eat matzah with it, and you have to eat it with bitter herbs. All of that from verse 8. Verse 11 says you have to have a belt on your hips, shoes on your feet, a staff in one hand, and you have to eat it in a hurry. Exodus chapter 12, verse 11. So if you're here, we provide everything that you need. We'll give you you know what, I'm not sure if we have enough rope this year. We better get some more. Oh, we do? Okay, Donna says we do. So we've got the rope for your belt, and we definitely have the stabs for you to hang on to. You'll have to bring your own shoes, and that's an important thing. Then we have to dispose of the leftover. Whatever's left over after everybody's eaten and they're full, and we've blessed God for it, and we've had our second assembly, our closing piece. You have to burn the leftover lamb in a fire so that no part of the lamb's flesh will remain until morning. That's from Exodus 12:10, and it's also found in Deuteronomy 16:4. Now, if for some reason you miss the first assembly, say I had gone to my brother's funeral, I would have to come to the second one. And that's a legitimate thing if I'm not the rabbi. As the rabbi or as a Cohen, you're not allowed to go to that funeral. But I mean, literally, the law, Bible laws, it says no. But the average person, on the other hand, would probably go and biblically speaking, would be okay. But then they wouldn't be able to do the first Pesach. Well, maybe you live too far away. You took your journey and you just didn't make it in time. Well, you're going to have to hang out for a month, because a month later, you're going to have your second Pesach. First, people who celebrate the first should not be celebrating the second. It's for the people who missed the first one. Person is not clean during Pesach, the first Pesach, according to the law of purity. He can celebrate the second Pesach, the Pesach on the 14th of the second biblical month. It must be celebrated in the exact same way as the first one. So if you want to know the rules of the second Pesach, go back and look at the rules we've just gone over. Oh, wow. I have run plumb out of time. Okay. Well, we'll do the ceremonial. I'm down to the talking about the ceremonial stuff. We'll just do that during the ceremony. We'll talk our way through it, work our way through it. Should be good. But that's everything I can tell you about the law of Pesach, all in a nutshell, in the little bit of time that I am allotted. Shalom v'shalom, y'all.
The blessing, Be'ivrit. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'huncha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.